migrant issues are popping up where I live, my birthplace in Chicago. There's a lot of rising tension between black and brown folks, or is there? And how do you talk to students or have civil community conversations about this stuff on the other side? Hello, 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 and welcome once again to the South Star Classroom. That's Omar, that's David. Jubilee might be joining us. She's getting caught up and she's moving around like I'll be moving around sometimes. So we may not have Jubilee today, but what we do have is an incredible show with a topic that is happening right now in the moment. And there's a lot of things happening in foreign policy this week. Some of the stuff is hitting domestically a little harder than others, but we're going to cover those things today. But before we jump into our topics, Omar, how are you doing today, good brother?
Man, I am doing all right. So I'm all dressed up. I started playing tennis again. I used to play as a youth, and I got to tell you that playing tennis at 43 is a radically different endeavor than playing tennis at 17. I mean, my body is
everything hurt right now?
Jacked up, baby. I mean, I'm on a lead. I got those little lidocaine patches all over the place. I mean, I look like some kind of patchwork man that just got out of a street fight in a dumpster. So I am great in that I am once again trying to get my body back in shape, but I'm all jacked up, baby. But of my own volition, so it's cool, man.
Hey, man, pickleball is like the fastest growing sport in America right now, man. Are you getting down with the pickleball, brother?
I've never played. I want to play I want to play some pickleball, man. It seems fun as hell. Get some paddles. I'm doing the real thing where I'm chasing this shit down like Capriati. And
I think it's the reason why older people our age are playing pickleball and not tennis, brother.
This is exactly right, man.
Smaller field, brother. Smaller court.
Indeed. And I love it, but and I signed up for this, but my coach is like a masochist, right? It's like you miss a shot, man, you're doing 20 push-ups. You miss a shot, you're doing lunges from one side of the court to the other. I know what I signed up for here, but my body's falling apart, man. It's falling apart. It's a total eclipse of the heart, ladies and gentlemen. That's what it is.
Man, that's what's up, man. Well, I'm glad you're here. You look good, man. You know
Thanks,
what I'm saying?
Bro. Appreciate you, man.
And the hair is still blacker than everybody else's. So that's all that matters, bro.
Blacker than black, and I'm black, y'all.
It's all good. David Castillo, how you feeling, brother?
I'm good. I got my new computer that I thought I was going to get. I don't got the I didn't have time to do the green screen. So the green screen will officially make a return next week. But yeah, I'm out of the my previous MacBook was it was embarrassing. So it was time. And we're upgraded. We're on the M2 Apple chip.
Okay.
You're probably on M3, Charles, or whatever.
M3 is not out yet, brother. We and M2 together.
All right, there you go. So that happened, and then a couple of days ago, I spent a long weekend in the homeland, the motherland of South Texas, where my family's from.
Nice.
And so I was able to travel there with my father. We visited, a bunch of family. We ate a lot of food. I mean, we was like breakfast tacos for lunch, dinner, and breakfast. And we went to a music festival. So my father is very much into a connoisseur of a particular style of music from South Texas called conjunto, kind of mixture of like Mexican music and German, influence. And it's quite the scene. It was a 2-day music festival, and we went both days and stayed till the end. And so I can officially say I festivaled with my dad,
That's what's up, man.
Yeah,
That's
it was
awesome.
cool. It was great.
Omar wants to comment. Go ahead, Omar. You're muted, brother. You are going to be, you're the mute king. We're going to change your name to that.
I am always muted, man. No, I was gonna say like that's badass. The German influence is no joke in South Texas, dude, especially in like a New Braunfels area. I think that's where we got the accordion from. I don't
Yep.
think the accordion
Yep.
came from us.
Nope.
And like
The
that's
accordion
an
came
all
from
that
the
thing. I know
Germans.
shit. Yep.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's
Yeah.
funny ass.
It's a fascinating history. It's very regional.
Super.
It's not Mexican. It's not American. It's kind of, you know, it's Tejano. And then even in South Texas, it's quite different. But you know, when you get
Which
into like
instrument
you're
did
in
you say? Which instrument?
the accordion.
The
I
accordion.
thought it was like Scottish or something.
Scottish played a version of the accordion, but like the accordion that eventually, you know, came into that part of Texas and then that evolved. They're all like German and Italian accordion makers. Yeah.
Interesting. Interesting.
Yep. And so West Texas is very dry, as Omar knows, kind of barren. But when you get into the valley, man, it's tropical, right? It's a tropical area, super green. And some of my family, they have a home. It's about a mile from the border, like all the way at the bottom near Brownsville. You know, it's pretty much like the last kind of standoff before you hit the border. And they live out in the country. It's beautiful. And point being, the backyard of their home, there's a resaca, which is like a canal. And lo and behold, they have flamingos in South Texas. I've never seen a flamingo in the wild. I've never
it's dope, right?
They're beautiful.
It's crazy. I've never
They're
seen
beautiful.
them in the wild. They are beautiful. Yeah. So I'm a big bird guy, and so I kind of check that off my list.
They'll chase you though.
Yeah, well,
they'll chase you. Yeah, some of them will chase you in some places. Man, well, those are great. So now that I'm back in the safety of my home, Omar, where I've been the last 10 days, giving out my location, man. In the last
You're so afraid of having people know where you're at.
Listen, man, I'm telling you, I had a bad experience, man. I don't like people. Like, it's just, I'm telling you,
really?
that's for a different day and a different show. But in the last 10 days, I've been in Oakland.
Wow.
Then I had to go to Kansas City, came home for a day. Then I was in Phoenix, came back, and then didn't come back. Went straight to Fort Lauderdale from there. And then just got back home. I came home just in time. Chappelle was here, so I got to see the Chappelle stand-up special. We had a lot of surprises. I think they were filming the Netflix special. So, like, you know, he was there. The DJ was there, and then Too Short is the last song because, you know, he got that part where it says, ask Dave Chappelle, ask Dave. And then the DJ did like a ask Dave Chappelle. And then everything went dark, and then it was like red. It was the red Dudum, the Netflix thing. And so the title of the Lunatics Manifesto came up, and this show was incredible. But he had all these openers from Chicago. And at the end, there was a mini concert of Chicago people. So there was Vic Mensa, Chance the Rapper, Common, and then it got closed out by my I would call him friend, but I don't want to be too familiar. But Fred Hampton Jr. closed it out. And he got Fred Hampton Jr. opened Chappelle's first block party. I don't know if you've ever seen the block party, but he opens it. So he got Chappelle to commit to doing the block party part 2 here in Chicago. So hopefully that's coming. But Hannibal Buress was a surprise comedian who's from Chicago. And in Hannibal's set, he was talking about the issue that we're talking about today, which is the migrant issue that's happening here in Chicago. Now, he had a lot of funny jokes about it. His jokes were, look, we've been settled here with Mexican and Puerto Rican for a minute, but this is like South America, and we gotta learn this or whatever. But it was a lot of jokes, but it was but it's something that has been on the news here every single day. So I'll just segue into our topic. So basically, what has happened is there's been a lot of issues with immigration policy here in this country. It's always a hot topic. Trump's whole thing was build a wall or whatever. You know, some people talk about open borders, but I think at this point, and you all correct me if I'm wrong, I think that Democrats and Republicans alike have agreed that there has to be some type of policy in place. Now, how humane that is, what that looks like, if there's limits, whatever the case is. So DeSantis and a lot of other and who is the guy out of Texas?
Abbott.
Greg Abbott.
Abbott. So Abbott, I said I misspoke with you earlier, but Abbott, for all of his immigrant people that he's getting, he's sending them to the places that have highly publicized that they're sanctuary cities. So Chicago is getting a large swath of migrant people, and they're basically getting loaded on a bus and they're getting dropped off in Chicago. And they're running out of spaces, they're running out of resources. So they have some in, you know, the police stations here or there. But there was like a community field house where a lot of Black inner city football, like youth football, gets played, and they were going to put these folks here. And there's resources that's being taken out of the community, and there was a protest from that. And but I found a video from it. It's a longer video. We'll put the link so you can watch the whole thing. But I do think that this lady did a really good job of summarizing it. Oh, and a friend of the show, friend of mine, like a sister of mine, Tanisha Peoples, is slightly in the video. You can see her mohawk. I know that mohawk anywhere, but the good sister's doing work for the South Side as always. Here is from one of the most recent protests.
We are not upset with the individuals who are being allowed to
Volume.
Oh.
Let me make that very clear because people get it confused. We are, however, outraged.
I don't think I can turn it up louder.
Okay.
The government response and our elected officials blatant disregard to the local crisis.
Can you still hear it?
Nope.
I was trying to make it louder. That didn't work. Hold on a second.
You got some closed captions?
You know what? I do. Well, do I? Let's see. I do not. That is not an option.
And our elected officials blatant disregard to the local crisis Black families and children are facing now in our city. It is disingenuous and highly disrespectful.
Can you still hear it?
Not anymore.
Okay, y'all. I'm gonna stop messing with the sound and just let it play then. My bad.
Yeah, just let it play, man. All good.
All right. There we go.
Let me make that very clear because people get it confused. We are, however, outraged with the government's response and our elected officials blatant disregard to the local crisis Black families and children are facing now in our city. It is disingenuous and highly disrespectful to come into neighborhoods that have suffered decades of disinvestment, redlining, poverty, and violence to tell them you're taking resources away.
You're gonna hear that beeping one more time.
That you allow to cross the border illegally. How dare you put these poor people against, especially because the very reason you claim they're here to seek asylum is the same reason and terror and injustice Black people face today. Chicago is working on an issue without addressing the current issue that it has with the communities that are suffering. And we're seeing resources fly out to help, but we're not getting that same type of support at the magnitude we're seeing now. And to expect us to flip the bill and hand over our already limited resources, public parks and school buildings that have been unjustly closed in the first place. Now you're putting the strain on our police officers and stations, obstructing their ability to do their job, serve our community, and our communities to go into police stations to receive services. In addition, it's inhumane to welcome people only to have them sleeping on floors and buildings and in tents that cannot withstand the wind of Chicago. Brandon Johnson ran on the promise that he would listen to our community. And in the beginning of this crisis stated that he would not re-traumatize those communities that are still suffering from the impact of school closing, redline, and violence. We are here today demanding that the city of Chicago and Brandon Johnson stop disrupting park programs, taking away from our children and families that depend on those services. We want
Okay, so
Yeah.
again, sorry for the sound issues, but just in case people couldn't really hear it, to summarize, she was basically being, and I'm glad she articulated that she's not upset with these people. These people have no idea what's happening. They have no control over these things, but they are being, Black people feel like they're being pitted against another like minoritized group, and they're getting their resources taken. There's money being given out, and also Brandon Johnson is our new incoming mayor. He's a Black man, very progressive, and he ran on some promises. And a lot of things that he said around how we felt about the police and this, that, and the third, those things got really, really tough as soon as he got in office. And so to have his base kind of stand up to him and stand out at him very loudly this early on might be somewhat distressing for him. But this is a larger issue, and it's not, Chicago's not going to be the only place. All the places that declared that they were sanctuary cities. So there's New York, there will be San Francisco. There will be a lot of places that have loudly advertised that they're going to be sanctuary cities. And unfortunately for a lot of people, most of those border states are Republican states, and they are going to follow in Abbott's footsteps about that. So before, so just commentary off of what you've heard thus far. David, I'm going to go to you first, and that way, Omar, you can get some more from hearing from us. You're our resident layperson today. But
Yeah.
David, from what you have read and what you just heard, what's your reaction?
Yeah, so I think I hadn't seen that clip before, but I think, you know, I tend to I mean, it's hard to not agree with the argument that she's making. Like Chicago is clearly is already in a state of crisis, with limited resources, and this kind of thing just kind of, you know, can tip the scales, right? What I didn't hear, you know, I heard like I heard respect and dignity for the humanity of the immigrants, right? So it wasn't a trashing of the immigrants. It was like, hey, we you know, it's not fair to us, right? There has to be another solution. So that's number one. It's a very different response that I heard from another community, Staten Island, right, in New York, where a similar thing was happening, but now we're talking about Italian Americans, and they're just straight up like, these people are a nuisance. We want them out of here, right? I'm like, so then my brain goes, I don't want to go too far off the deep end here, but then my brain goes to like, you know, like the topic of the show. I'm like, there's so much to teach here, right? Like, let's look at what it was like when the Italians immigrated to New York, right? Hundreds of years ago. How were they treated? But bigger picture, I think for me is the teachable moment, you know, that to you know, working with young students in the classroom is to teach about like the systems, right? The governmental systems, right? You have a federal government, we pass a federal policy, then you have states that are doing their thing, and then there you have municipalities and cities like Chicago. And it's a clear failure of government to coordinate, right? That's what we're seeing here. So again, I put my history teacher hat on, and I'm like, you know, there's so much to dive into here. So I'll leave it there. I want to hear what Omar has to say.
I mean, a lot. I think when you break down what is the core issue for our audience, that I think this young lady who in the microphone was saying quite eloquently, was that we are here as a nation of immigrants to accept immigrants. However, two things, really it's three, but the first two are like, you're sending these immigrants to areas of cities that are already in deep need of resources and are already having like extreme difficulties from neglect from their city government, their state government, and their federal government. So why are you sending them to these areas that are already in deep need? Like, is this like, what are you doing here? Like, we could opinion say this is just blatant racism, or this is just, we don't know what else to do with them, so we're going to put them in these corners where essentially the NIMBY, the not in my backyard, isn't going to really come into play. And like, I was having this conversation yesterday, and I'm not going to pose myself as a hypocrite, meaning the massive immigration is coming through El Paso. It is El Paso is one of the primary cities where the overwhelming majority of immigrants are coming, and then they're getting shipped out to different places, but they're here. And El Paso is very much a sanctuary city and trying to figure out what are we doing for these folks. And I live, ironically or coincidentally, in front of my old middle school, Moorhead Junior High, that I vowed when I left Moorhead that I would create my own school, so I would never have to worry about any other kid going to such a shitty school. That school has now been shut down, and then the city bought it, and it is being used as a sanctuary for immigrants. And this is NIMBY in its perfection, which is, if you're going to be a real liberal, a classical liberal, and say, we should respect these folks and do what is needed and provide them resources, then you must follow through that liberalism and say, even if they live directly in front of me, which they do now, I will support that because they need some place to go. I think what this woman is saying in Chicago is that, listen, like, it's great that they're coming, but why are you not helping these folks into areas where they can garner resources? It looks like you're just shadowing them and putting them in places where, because it's not top of mind for a lot of folks, it's going to be highly ignored, which then can constitute like several issues, right, of racism. The second thing, and I'll be quick, is that I always get into this debate about what is politics and what is policy. And for our audience, policy is, what are we actually doing to solve the problem? So we'll dive later into the show about immigration reform and what we're trying to actually do. But like, what y'all are seeing is like politics. This is the theater. This is Governor Greg Abbott and people who are running for the presidency doing things to increase their profile, to basically demonstrate to their electorate, hey, like, I don't agree with this thing where I tried to build a wall. I'm doing this. It's the liberals and it's the Democrats that are destroying, your life. So we're going to send them to these Democratic cities to see, like, if they're really worth their muster, which is the theater of politics, but a highly ironic thing for Governor Greg Abbott to do, because Texas business is highly reliant on immigration labor. And always has been and always will be. Why? Sadly, because those folks aren't paid nearly what most people are, keeping labor costs down. So what y'all are seeing is a lot of like the theater of the shit. But those are my initial takes. I got a lot of deeper cuts.
Well, we'll get to those deeper cuts.
Kevin McCarthy.
Well, we'll get. Oh, see, yeah, there's a lot that's happening, right? And and a lot of lives were also lost. Baby. And a lot of lives have been lost in the recent attack at the Gaza Strip as well. That I don't think we've learned how to. I don't think we've learned how to teach American children about that conflict that's been happening since Bible days. Right? It's a very entrenched thing that's happening there. But you said something earlier, David, about the Italian community. Again, I was born in Maywood, which used to be heavily Italian, and they went through a few changes. Just for context, people don't understand how big Chicago is. So the Italian population in Chicago is more than 500,000. That's more than 500,000. Just to put that in context, all of Oakland's population as a whole is about 430,000.
Wow.
Yeah, it's a huge city. And Chicago, again, see, this is where the hyper politics, and this is where Brandon Johnson is getting some pushback, because Chicago is the most segregated metropolitan city in the country. So what it has felt like, and the people that you heard, is that Black people have felt targeted, that even as you spread these people out, they're not being spread out evenly amongst. You didn't do that in the Italian community or whatnot. Now, to be fair, there has been some drop-offs, from what I'm understanding, in some brown communities. I just heard people talking about it. I didn't have a source there. But also, Chicago's also another place where we have a large like diasporic Hispanic population. They do not all get along. As a Black person that was born here, I have learned and been taught to stay out of brown folks' business. Like, so there are Mexican communities, there are like Salvadorian spots, there are like, you know, Puerto Rican, like there's a lot of different things. So there's been a lot of internal talk that's also been happening as well, versus like basically people who have legal citizenship versus folks that might not have legal citizenship. I do not feel like I'm at liberty to speak on it because I hear it in passing. I have heard it. I have Mexican neighbors. One of them lives over here, and the other one that's across the street with the black son, he's over there, and they have some very strong views. I will not share their views without their consent. But I feel like you two as brown folks that live in the places that you live can probably surmise where some of these folks might be going with this stuff. So how do we have fervent, honest, respectful conversations about an issue that is going to be it's an American issue, and it will be. And like I said, you know, I don't want to, Republicans get on my nerves. I don't want to let Democrats off the table either, though, right? Off the hook either, because you got to come together and y'all got to figure out some type of border policy. And to not have that is going to keep us in these positions where Republicans can grandstand and Democrats can grandstand. Because I think what Abbott is doing is only the beginning. I don't think this is the end. Yep.
I mean, I'll jump in there quickly. I think so. This is just I'm spitballing here. This is one of the issues when we slap a label as, you know, such as like whatever you want to call it, Latino, Latine, Latinx, whatever it is, you know, across such a wide and varied group of people. Yeah, because what we're looking at now, you know, a lot of the current migration is obviously not coming from Mexico. It's coming through Mexico, but it's like South American, Venezuelan, for the most part. And then from the, you know, the Caribbean countries too, Haiti. And so you'd be like, hey, you know, somos mexicanos americanos, you know, they're from Venezuela. Well, like, we're actually very different people. So I think the first thing to do is like look at it again, like who is actually immigrating right now? What's happening in Venezuela, right? There's like more stuff to, like, you know, so many layers of the onion you could peel back if you wanted to teach about this stuff, right? Because there are forces that are, you know, at play in Venezuela, and in Haiti, which are causing people to flee in mass numbers. Something like 7.7 million refugees from Venezuela worldwide as of August, with 6.5 million of them hosted in 17 Latin American and Caribbean countries. So 7.7 and then 6.5. So you got about a million plus or minus that are probably in the US and maybe like Europe, I would assume. So it's important to understand that. The last thing I'll say here, and Omar, I'm sure, can attest to this. There's this amazing thing that happens, like when we are immigrants, the door is open for us. We come through the door, and what we tend to do, the more time has passed that we've come through that door, we don't mind if the door shuts, right? And so I was just in South Texas, and I will tell you, this is like you're like right there up against Mexico. And this is an area that's like turning Republican, right? There's a lot of Republicans there. You have an incredible amount of you know, mind-blowing percentage of people that son Mexicano-Americanos, that are second, third generation, that are anti-Mexican, anti-immigrant, right? I'm like, are you serious? Like, we got to work through this stuff, people. It's crazy. They literally just like, you know, I'm like, that was you 70 years ago, right? But for some reason, you know, the longer we're here, you know, we claim to have some kind of like ownership over it, and, you know, somos más americanos que ustedes, pero, you know, it's like it's mind-boggling. So that is a very real thing.
Look, I'll just jumping off of that and getting into what David was originally talking about is that, like, from an educational standpoint, history gets obscured and it's not being taught in a way where
Mhm.
the point, in my opinion, as a history teacher who taught like, you know, social studies to middle school and high school kids, I always
Yeah.
felt like the necessity of history wasn't just in critical thinking, because you're getting all these stories and you got to figure out from all these stories what the facts are, where the pieces are, where this thing lands, is that you're doomed to repeat the past if you don't
Mhm.
know the past. So the future is contingent on knowing the past so that you don't repeat it. And
Mhm.
I would say human beings, the historical reference is not that we're repeating, it's that we're rhyming. So, for example, when the Scottish and the English came to the southern part of the United States, they were like, this is really our area. And they were pissed off. They hated the Pilgrims, and everyone hated the Pilgrims. Just by the way, like all this bullshit with Thanksgiving, like, yesterday was Columbus Day and all this like fun stuff. I'm like, yo, these people were the worst. They got kicked out of Amsterdam, all the Puritans. They led a really shitty, hypocritical lifestyle, and that's become a bit of the DNA of the United States. I've got no love for them. I got no love for the Mayflower. Like, if I ever run for politics, this video is going to be up and running, and I gotcha. And it's because this is the story of immigration in the United States. The folks who came first in the southern part were extraordinarily reticent to be like, okay, you guys come on in, and extraordinarily reticent to combine their philosophical ideologies, of which eventually became the Civil War. Truly, like, we fought an inordinate war because of the difficulties of these two different immigrant classes, right? But the immigration situation, as according to the founding fathers, was that like, hey, like, we've got this manifest destiny ideology. We need as much help as we can get to populate the rest of this country. Fast forward to Andrew Jackson, who made a pact with Sam Houston. This is all Texas history, where he was like, hey, can you just, like, I don't know, take Texas from Mexico? Like,
Mhm.
we'll like backdoor support you with like people in arms, but I need you to do this because we're trying to immigrate this area. And it becomes this like rhyming story of those that come in and get here, then are like, okay, we're good now. We don't need to allow any other immigrants in.
Right.
And we don't have any in present day. It's important for kids to learn the history, but I think it's really important for kids to be like, what is the policy of the United States? So you've got this really beautiful, iconic message on the Statue of Liberty: give me, you're tired, you're poor, you're hungry, right? The United States is a country of immigrants, but at some point, no one has had, I would say, the balls to sit down and be like, what are we actually doing here? Like, are we creating a policy that makes sense to like legally allow folks into this country, and fast track it so that they can become tax-paying citizens? Or are we just on these like weird strands? Because as it stands right now, you're not allowed to enter unless you have like years of processing, like 10, 15 years, you can get a green card. You're seeking asylum
Mhm.
because you are coming from a situation where you're in such dire straits, you're fleeing for your life. So it becomes like a human rights, like a Geneva Convention type of thing, right? Or you're doing what so many of us did, which is like you sneak in and then you apply for the paperwork while you're here and do it all, quote, legally, which is my beef with the Mexican American population. They're like, my abuelita did it legally. I'm like, no, she didn't. No, she didn't. She was here. Fuck no, she did not. People are like, they did it legally. Like, fuck
I
no, they
cannot
didn't.
laugh nor frown at that comment. I am not a part of that community. I do not know that history.
Yeah, man. And like, like, you could say my own parents, like, were here and then got their naturalization. So they were already here. And there's something to say about being here, working, providing into the tax basis. But the teachable moment is just in exposing to students what was and what is, because I don't even think Americans have a very clear ideology of what was and what is. And like, the discrimination was like through the roof, man. You've got like, signs where like, yeah, we'll allow you know, the Italians, but not the Irish. You know, we'll allow the Irish, but not the Mexicans. There's signs from like El Paso's own history that's like no blacks, no Mexicans, no dogs. Like, what the fuck? Like, you know? So like,
I mean, and there was
it wasn't that long ago. It was not that long
and
ago.
it wasn't. And I was gonna say, and there were negotiations, like, you know, with the Italian folks, like, hey, well, if you want to be American, this is what you got to do.
Yes.
So the bank, a lot of people don't know, a Bank of America used to be Bank of Italy, and like, you know, and they was like, and we will exalt your hero. So Christopher Columbus, like, so again, like in black and brown communities, like we don't really rock with Columbus like that. Columbus Day in Italian American communities, Columbus Day is a thing. Like it is you don't like when they were taking down those statues, those Italian folks was like, hey, check this out, man. like touch this statue if you want to, and we're gonna be on the South Side. I will find a clip for you all. I'm also reading this book. It's called Built from Fire. I don't know if you can see it. Hold on. You can see it a little bit. Built from Fire, the epic story of Tulsa's Greenwood District. And
that's an iPad. It's not a book.
Yeah, well, it's a book that I'm reading on iPad, old man.
Damn.
The book cover, one more time, is Built from Fire. Built from the Fire, the epic story of Tulsa's Greenwood District, America's Black Wall Street. The reason why I'm putting that up is because in this book, and the reason why I really wanted to read this book is I always hear about the massacre. You hear about the burning down. Yeah. This was the building up, like how that happened. I mean, it will eventually get to the massacre, but there's a lot of stories in there. But there was this section in the book that I had to do a double take on. It was talking about the natives in Oklahoma, in that area, that also had slaves, that had integrated, that had gotten, you know, they had fully integrated into the system. They wanted their kids to go to certain type of schools. And they also, the ones that got wealthy and made certain deals, they had slaves, right? And I think when we talk about our history, it's like we always get an aversion, and I'm not trying to, that's not me having a larger commentary on Native Americans. Like there were rich, wealthy black people that would buy slaves as well. Like in this time, it was these things happen. But again, these are not things that you get taught in school. And I think when we have these kind of conversations, this is why I'm so glad I found that video in the 11th hour for today's show. And I'm glad I did, because that sister did a really good job of balancing, like, listen, we are pissed off and we're not about to have this because it's not fair, but we're not mad at these people. And I think that that's what the Republicans' plan was to be. The Republicans' plan, and again, they needed Brandon Johnson in that plan, right? Because it's like, look, we're going to make a show up. We're going to ship him to Chicago, ship him to San Francisco. David, you were telling us about what's happening in New York, in Long Island, and all that good stuff. And again,
Staten Island,
Staten Island, I'm sorry. And let's be honest, Staten Island is not the most revered borough when you're talking about New York, right? It is one of the, I'm just saying, right? Like when you think that the South Side of Chicago, Staten Island, no, they wouldn't actually. That's the point, right? They be like,
I know.
It was like we're the forgotten borough, right? We the ones that's on the tip, and it's like, yo, but they wanted this to turn into a black-brown thing. They wanted it to, like, I think that they wanted it to spill. I think that they wanted. I think if I'm a Florida Republican, a Texas Republican, an Arizona Republican, I want to push to them fighting. I want to push to them saying, not on our line. You want to get clips of black people and other brown people and Italian people saying what is deemed to be Republican shit. You know what I'm saying about this issue, right? And I think that, like, again, y'all, we talk about this. When the elephants fight, it's the grass that suffers. And you know what I mean? And that is something that we are continuing to have an issue with. But as this relates to education, our education system and the South Star Classroom and what we do, there are major international things that are touching American soil that we don't know how to talk about. We don't know how to talk about this immigration issue. We don't know how to talk about it in Oakland, where it's happening. And schools are also getting a flood of new immigrants there that, like, in Oakland, listen, man, David and I both worked in Oakland. We both worked in OU, and we know the OUSD system. I worked in comms, bro, where you had to get things translated like 30 times. My friend that works there now at a community, at a youth org center, is like, some of these young people are coming from places that don't have a written language. It's just a spoken language, right? And like they don't really know exactly what to do. So I just think that that's one issue. Then you got this stuff happening with Hamas and the stuff that's happening in Israel and like all the politics that are, it seems like if you speak up on any side of that, if you say, man, people died, this is sad, some political faction is coming for you. Like it is a thing. And I'm gonna be honest with you, I didn't learn about those conflicts in my K-12 education. I did not. I don't know if you all did. I did not learn about the Gaza Strip. I didn't learn, and if I did, it was probably I heard something about the West Bank, but I was never taught with the fervor of like, this is a thing that's been happening for hundreds of years, and this is what the consequences are. So what advice do you all have for the South Star community, the South Star classroom community that's trying to figure out ways to talk to their kids about this? Like, I mean, you're in San Diego now, David. Like, you probably run into this in a different type of fashion. Like, what is it that you say to your kid who might be in school and hear his friends say something, or hear the white kids or the black kids say something, or you got this new group of people that kind of came in together and we don't really know what's going on? Like, how do you sit him down in a system that is not properly preparing him to be a world citizen that the United States demands us to be now?
Great question. So I think there's definitely like a teaching angle here, and thank you, Selena's musings, coming in with the heat, coming in with the fire.
Good-ass comments, man.
Yeah, yeah, exactly.
I like it.
Yep. But I think there's definitely, again, like I put my teacher hat on, and I'm like, there is so much here to like dig into. If we're talking about immigration, or we're talking about the current conflict in the Middle East. The reason I say current is because this goes back, a long time, right? Israel as a country was officially created and carved out with the support of the United Nations in 1948. It was not that long ago, but the region obviously has a deep history going back thousands and thousands of years. So to your point, Charles, I talked to my son yesterday, dropping him off at school. I'm like, you've probably seen stuff here and there, on the internet. I'm like, what is your take on what's happening in the Middle East right now? What have you heard? So I always start there. I'm like, what have you heard? What have you seen? What questions do you have? And I'm kind of gearing him up to go to school, because he does attend school with we have a large Arabic population here where we live. And so, like the kids are probably going to be talking about it. Teachers might be talking about it. Turns out he didn't hear anything at school. They don't talk about it, which I think is a mistake. You should be talking about it. But I'm like, just, this is a conflict that's gone on for a very long time. It's very complicated. And, at the end of the day, it's there are people that are caught in the crossfire between, the extremes. You have like these two warring factions in government and people, and it's unfortunate for the people, but I don't necessarily like if he wants to ask questions and I'll help him with that. But really, the way I approach it as a parent is like, what have you heard? What questions do you have? And then kind of go from there. And the other thing is, like, with social media now, it's freaking wild, right?
Yeah,
I mean, these things used to happen and you read about it in the paper, right? And now, like, this is my advice to him, and my advice to everybody is, like, when you see stuff on social media, especially what was formerly known as Twitter with all of its misinformation, thank you, Elon Musk, is like, don't believe anything that you see. You're going to consume a lot of media. It's going to show you this or that or this or that. And I'm like, look at it, wait until the information is verified, right? Because there's insane amounts of like conspiracy theories out there about things that just really never happened, with this current conflict. A lot of it's true. And a lot of it isn't. I'll give you a story, which is wild. I forget the Twitter account, but I saw something on Twitter and this thing went viral, right? And this woman was making a case to say that, Omar, you'll get a kick out of this, right? That it's been long known that the Mexican cartels have been hosting Hamas terrorists at
Oh, yeah.
training camps in Matamoros, right? And this is like on the. I was just there. I didn't see any like Hamas terrorists, or people, but you know, and that they sneak over. They're preparing for an invasion of the U.S. You know, they're going to sneak over the Rio Grande at night, and it's like, why aren't we talking about that? I'm like, because the shit ain't true. But
Right.
it gets out there. It's the craziest conspiracy theory I've ever heard. But again, like, you know, young people are going to be consuming media, TikTok, whatever they're on, and it's important that you just gotta like, you just can't believe everything that they read.
I've heard about Al Qaeda. I've heard about Al Qaeda, you know, partnering with like El Chapo's like crew, as far as like them working together and, you know, sharing in drug trades for, you know, so they can get money to fund certain things. I mean, I don't know what's true. I mean, that's what it's crazy, man. And Omar, before you jump in, you know, I brought up the inner, you know, issues amongst the brown community. We have them in the black community. Like, I don't know, this isn't you all's. I mean, you might have heard about this, but I wouldn't be surprised if you hadn't. There's like foundational Black Americans, right? Those are Black Americans that we can trace our lineage to slavery. We were enslaved and then we weren't. Versus like, you know, Black people who immigrated here from like the Caribbean or wherever, right? So what that does is that puts people like me and Jubilee in direct conflict, right? Like, I'm what you would call foundational Black, because you can trace me, even though my grandmother, I'm pretty sure, like, you know, is it done came from, you know, somewhere, whatever the case is. But because I had family that was slaves, I'm foundational. But because her parents are Jamaican, right? It's usually like first, second, third generation. Like, you came from like one of the islands, or you came from the motherland, or from England, or whatever the case is, right? Somehow you got here. And there's a lot of beef there because it's around the reparations conversation. Who actually should get it? Who shouldn't, if that's a thing? And it turns into something, but it gets very brutal. It gets very brutal. And I hate using this term. I like to just say racist, but it gets very anti-Black, both ways, right? It's a nasty conversation. And you all know I have a love for the islands. I go to Caribbean every single year. I love being in the Bahamas. I love being in that Black, you know, island where I invest, where I spend money. You know what I'm saying? Those people treat me great. And again, it feels like in some ways we're going backwards around how to have these kind of conversations and these race relations. And I just feel like if we're not going to really teach our young people how to be global citizens, we're going to take a significant step back, especially as things that are happening right now. Like, there's a lot of things that's coming down the pike. I think this is just the beginning. This is just the beginning of a lot of those conflicts, and people are going to keep taking sides. And what's going to happen is people are going to be siloed into their sides. And when you need them to come together, I don't think we're going to be strong enough or able to do it. I do think that this ploy is going to work, and some Republicans will absolutely pick up ground in Chicago. I'm going to be very honest with you. I think that with this happening, there are some Black people, and I think these are good people. I think these are sweet people, but I know that are paying their taxes, that are doing what they need to do, and they want to hear their governor and their mayor, and not just their mayor, because again, I live in the South suburbs, but what happens in Chicago matters to all of Illinois. Like, it is that magnanimous of a place. It's such a big place. They're going to want to hear people have an answer or a response to an immigration thing. And if they just keep playing amongst party lines, you're going to hear some stuff. And I think I think you're going to see brown people and Black people. They're going to pick up votes in both of those places. And I just think it's sad, man. I really do. And I think playing political like roulette with like people's lives really sucks. And I don't know what's going through these migrant folks' minds, right? Like, think about whatever horror they were facing. Think about whatever was happening in their country. And I don't know this place, so I can't, I can speculate what I've read. But again, I'm reading American news. I don't know if that got a different type of slant, because the United States is never like Venezuela. Unless when we were doing business, it was cool. When business stopped, it wasn't, right? Like, I mean, I think at one time we loved Pinochet, right? And then he was the worst monster of all time.
We put Pinochet into power, yeah.
Exactly, right? At one time, we also trained some guy by the name of Osama bin Laden. We gave them resources to take certain things down, and then we weren't cool with them, right? And then he became the worst person. Again, it's so many different stories, man. You have to raise smart, sober kids in this, I mean, damn, I shouldn't even stop at kids. Like, you need smart, sober communities at this point. And with us starting so far behind, yo, like we're like -10 on the number scale right now, as far as knowledge and understanding. Like, solve America's problems right now, Omar. We're gonna go to you and we're gonna go to David.
Solve America's problems right now.
I get the host. I get the host and make y'all solve all the problems, baby.
We're already at the 50-minute mark. So man, like
Wow.
I can't go off for like the hour that I want to go off on and shit. I think the biggest thing that I could give our audience and the biggest takeaway is that many people have talked about this, like George Carlin to Chris Rock to Jon Stewart, which is like, stop getting aligned in gangs. And like, I mean, blue and red gangs. I'm not talking about Crips. I'm not talking about Bloods. I'm talking about Democrat, Republican. Y'all, please, before you start formulating an opinion and have an emotional outburst, it's so imperative to just sit back and start collecting information and like try to understand what's going on first. So like, you go online and people are spouting off about the Palestinians and the Israelis. Yo, I went to, and like this ain't, you know, I'm not trying to humble brag here and shit. I went to a place called the Harvard Kennedy School. It's Harvard's premier public policy school. It is literally the world's public policy school. 52% of the Harvard Kennedy School is international. People send their kids here to become prime ministers and presidents. And my class is already taking those spots in Thailand, in Indonesia, in Nepal, in Africa, in Mexico. I had an enormous group of Israeli and Palestinian folks there. And I would try to sit down with them who lived it and try to understand the complexity and the history of what went down in that area. And I would consider myself a relatively smart guy. I mean, smart enough to get into Harvard. And it was so complex for me to sit there and try to digest what was going on that I just, at some point, I'm like, I will continue gathering information, but I have no right to formulate a overall opinion because the layers of complexity in Israeli-Palestinian history is so difficult and so deep. And people are like, Israel's United States ally. We should be supporting the Israelis and we should be supporting the Palestinians at all. There's that opinion. The atrocities happening to the Palestinians is a human rights issue. We should be supporting the Palestinians, but the Palestinians, and you know, whether you want to talk about the religious context of how they treat women and how they treat their own people, lends another argumentation into this. Mm-hmm. My moral of the story is we need to shut the fuck up and listen as a society a lot more and try to hold our emotions or our opinions and try to get back to a place of like, how can we understand more and what do we actually have power to do something about? So this immigration issue is 300 years in the making, 400 years in the making. What more information can we gather? So like you drop bombs right now that most people don't know. Yes, in the 1980s, the United States, when they were going through an inordinate amount of like Cold War shit, trained the Afghanis to specifically fight against the Soviet Union capturing Afghanistan as part of the Soviet Republic takeover. As a result, the CIA did train Osama bin Laden. The CIA in the 1970s set up a shitload of banana republics in Central America, destabilizing the area, leading towards things like Hugo Chavez to take over in Venezuela and socialist regimes, because we had effed over that area of the world, much like the Europeans effed over Africa, depleting them of resources, putting in puppet governments, doing just nefarious shit that like now we're seeing the repercussions of the instability that we created. That's all history, right? So I think in educational terms, one, exposing kids to the information and allowing them to kind of like digest it. But I would even preface it and say, before you formulate opinion, try to learn. And I, for one, as a teacher, tried very hard not to put my opinion in. granted, I was in my 20s and I was very passionate. So I'm not gonna lie, my opinion came out, man. Like,
There you
fucking,
go.
I'm sure it
I
did.
couldn't hide it all the time, but I tried very much so to give voice to those different opinions in the room and be
Mhm.
like, see, like, this is what it's all about. But it's that conversation with your kids, like the talk, right? Like, this is America. It ain't fair. It is not. It is a country based primarily on a lot of racism and exclusivity, and certainly people's ideology of a predominance of one religion over the other. So for us to sit here and look at what's going on in Israel, mostly Jewish, the Jewish protected state, Palestinians, mostly Muslim, the the bedrock of what they believe to be their land, because when the Israelis left, they were the ones who held that land, cultivated it, and owned it. Thus, the massive dispute over said land is so marred in culture, religion, complexity of ideological, philosophical, and political thought. That's like my best advice, man. Like, STF, man, shut the fuck up and listen and learn to ask better questions, because piping off on social media isn't going to help shit. It's not going to help you, and it's not going to help anybody else. The best thing we can do is try to create an educated populace, so that when we do have power to vote and exercise our opinion, we're doing so with at least the most information, instead of, like, I don't know, starting bullshit ass gang warfare on social media.
It's
Being like,
a
"Oh,
lot of
I'm
it's a lot of
blue, I'm red."
it's a lot of gang shit happening, and I don't think it's ironic that it's blue and red,
Mhm.
and Bloods and Crips is blue and red, and why,
Mhm.
Omar, why don't you roll up your final thought in this? And David, this doesn't impact you. I want you to take as long on your answer as well. But Omar,
Okay.
roll in your final thought now.
Yeah, look, I think that final thoughts, and just for the audience sake, I grew up hearing so much about the Israeli-Palestinian conflict. I'm half Lebanese, right?
Mhm.
Lebanon as a country didn't exist until the 1940s. This all happened after World War II. So we were in, like, an area of the world that was, for the Lebanese, the Phoenicians started that world, and then, man, you had the Assyrians, the Arabs, the Ottomans, the French came into
Mhm.
Lebanon for a while. So you're talking about, Syria, Jordan, Israel. That whole area has been populated by so many different populations that the complexity of the issue um, deserves respect. So, as a
Yeah.
Lebanese cat who grew up listening to this stuff, and it's still very um, confused, is a nice way of putting it, like, in need of even more information, I would say, like, temper your opinions and expression of those opinions, particularly on social media, period. And try to cultivate as much information as you can without,
Mhm.
like, adhering to the whims of one side to the other, because if you are, you're just a puppet. You're being manipulated, and you're being manipulated on purpose, because that purposeful manipulation is going to cause you in anger to choose one side or the other, vote one way or the other, and, like, someone's playing you. And, like, I want to go back to a comment that Doc was
Selena.
saying earlier
Oh,
about
me.
Al
Oh, go
Qaeda.
ahead. I'll
And
take
I
it.
was like, listen, man, not to make things totally light, but, like, we haven't started the war on, we've gotten the war with Al Qaeda, but what about the war on on Al Sharpton?
I'll go.
To quote Clayton
Al
Bigsby,
Cracker.
to quote
Gotcha.
Chappelle. And by the way, audience, I am joking. I'm just circling back to
We're
the Doc
Chappelle
talking
fans.
about
Yeah, that's a
Chappelle.
Chappelle show
Indeed.
joke.
But
There you
my
go.
point being, man, chill out, talk with your kids, expose them to enough information, and understand that, like, politics is a game that we just saw happen with Kevin McCarthy, where he got kicked out of the speaker's house. Why? Because he worked with Democrats to keep the government open. And those
Yeah.
8 ultra right wing people were like, get the hell out. And, like, that is what you are being manipulated into doing, is taking bullshit sides, and you're getting pissed off at your fellow American and your fellow fucking patriot over what? And for what? Like, what is the ultimate end of your hate? Nothing
Crazy.
except your own manipulation.
That's all you, David. You roll, have your full response,
Yeah.
and then just tag on your
Roll
final
out.
thought at the end. I
I'm
want you
good.
to
I'm
have your
good.
time.
Yeah. All right. Yeah, I think what did Omar say? The complexity of the issue deserves our respect, and I think that is true. I think also the importance of listening and not rushing to judgment. Like things are so polarized now, right? And for this current immigration crisis to be happening, for this current escalation of tensions in the Middle East to be happening at this moment is kind of wild because you don't see any of the nuance. It's just like if you claim support for the Israeli Jewish people, you're like you're this, or if you claim support for the plight of the Palestinians, then you're this, right? It's totally insane. But in reality, there's nuance, there's gray area, and I think you can get there like by listening. I want to return to this the the current wave of immigration that we have. Going back to the video that you played earlier, I thought the speaker did a really good job of, like I said, recognizing the humanity of these people. So who are these people? I'm just going to stick with like this train of thought of people that are coming here from Venezuela, that are leaving that country in big numbers, right? And you know how they end up in El Paso? They make their way through Central America. They hop
It
on
is not around the
trains.
corner. It is not around the corner.
They
They're
hop on
walking.
trains through Mexico. They're
Yep.
continuously robbed and extorted. And they take a cargo train, not a regular
Yeah,
train.
dude.
They like sit in a cargo train. Imagine like what it would take for somebody to just like you walk out of your house and you're just like walking, to another
man.
continent, right? Figuring out how to get through. You got children. It's insane. And I think, there again, like stop and listen to the story. People don't do that just for, shits and giggles. Like it is a very serious thing. It's a humanitarian crisis, right? And so I think, that the immigration piece is definitely real. It reminds me of a project that I did with my students a while back around immigration, and we had students record, talk to their family members that had some kind of an immigration experience. Most of them were Mexican Americans, so it was like coming here from Mexico. They wrote these dialogues. We made these podcasts, and kids for the first time got to hear their parents' immigration experience, right? And for a lot of our Black students, it was like moving from Louisiana to the Bay, like in the what do you call it, the Great Migration. I'm like not
And
across,
I've been reading there's a lot of Black people on the Trail of Tears too.
Yeah. So not crossing like country lines, but going from one part of the country to another. And there's a similar theme, right? People are coming for a better life and for opportunity. So I think, I think we got to listen more, make informed opinions. And I think if you're teaching, if you're a parent, don't shy away from this stuff. Young people are going to see this stuff on social media. They are going to form their own opinions. I think we have a responsibility both in the classroom and at home to help them make sense of it. Like, let's not come in with I'm not going to show up with a Free Palestine shirt to school, and I'm not going to show up with an Israeli flag shirt either. I'm going to show up in a white shirt, and I'm going to listen to students, and I'm going to respond to their questions. I'm going to let them dialogue, because that's what you got to do. So
I think
the
exercise of just listening and trying to critically think through things is the best thing you can do educationally, because that is the educational output. It's the critical thinking thought, and like chill out on like voicing the opinion. Think of it that the critical thought is the end all be all, at least from an educator standpoint.
And I say read, and I would add all that. I would add in read. I would say try to find as many, first degree writings, first person writings of that time, because I think it's very illuminating. And I think just listening to you all, and I'll roll my final thought and listen to it as well. But my general response is like, this stuff is nuanced, man. Like there's a lot of different things happening. I also want to say this, and I think as a Black person who is very swayed, and I am that Black Panther generation. I love the Panthers. I believe that. I'm very like, pro Black, red, black, and green. And I've also traveled the world, and I am grateful to be living in the United States. I mean, that's not really the most popular thing to say as a black person. Then that don't mean that. I mean, there's inequities here that need to be solved and be fixed. And again, what people are willing to go through and walk through and fight through and run through and be tortured through and be sold through and all that stuff to get to this place, I think it's really interesting. I've just been reading a lot about fallen empires, and everything that I'm reading about those, like I'm seeing us do. It's like breaking down into factions. It's breaking, losing that, you lose a credible news source. Nobody trusts anybody. Nobody believes anybody. And the first thing that any emperor would do, or when somebody else is trying to come, is they would take over who makes the news. It is a thing. You don't have, without us having an independent news source that's unbiased, man, I think that it makes us dumber and more susceptible to a lot of different things. I think even as I'm reading that book, and like you said, man, they talk about those migration patterns. They talk about, just thinking about being in the South as a Black person, like somebody outside, like getting hung and getting whipped still. Like slavery didn't stop Black people from getting hung and people whipping them. And to not even know what's in California, but to hear like, oh, there's something in this Chicago, there's something in this New York, there's something in this California. Like, I'm going to go out and make that trek. Like, me and my book club would, we were joking about this, man, but it was like, I failed every time I tried to play Oregon Trail. Like, I died of dysentery. I could never, a damn wheel broke. I caught something. I couldn't get out. I couldn't get out the first state, man. I'm drowning horses and shit, man. These are not weak people. These are not weak people. These are not feeble people. These are people. Humans have a knack to survive and to go wherever they need to go to survive. And I think there's a lot of things that we take for granted here. And, as Omar said earlier, what it says on the Statue of Liberty, give me your tire, give me your weak. I also want to note that there were significantly less people in this country when that shit was written. Like Oakland, when that was written, Oakland was an unfounded place full of oak trees. Like, you know what I'm saying? Like it was not, it was foresty, man. It was that nice little place across from that San Francisco Peninsula place, right? And there's just a lot, man. Like I just been reading these books, like Hella Oakland, about the history of Oakland. Did y'all know that Oakland was supposed to be a borough of San Francisco? Did you know that like New York got developed and then San Francisco saw that, they hired somebody from that area to come because their goal was to like Richmond, Berkeley, Albany, all that was supposed to be boroughs. It was supposed to be boroughs so they could always compete with New York because New York's mayor has a ton of power over a large landmass. Like there are all these little wars. There's all these little things that carve out our history, right? Whether it's you talking about the Alamo, whether you're talking about the Trail of Tears, whether you're talking about like, listen, man, I also want to just say, because as somebody who grew up in a place that used to be Italian and is now Black, when you put different groups of people together and there are men and women in those groups, mixing is going to happen. like these places are mixing, man. Like, you know what I'm saying? Like I have a Creole grandmother, you know what I'm saying? Like Dominicans is Black, Hispanic, like white, like it's kind of all of it. All I'm saying is this world is becoming more impacted, but it's also becoming bigger and smaller at the same time. And if we don't learn how to share these resources, if we don't learn how to have a humane society, if we don't learn how to like just be civilized towards each other, not even just the third world countries, I'm talking about London, I'm talking about here, like all these places that people put a lot of credence on and people are fighting to get into, we will see our end. Like there has every empire that has risen has also fallen. And I think at the rate we going, I don't want to be alive for the fall of the United States. But for my final thought and just for my appreciation, we have to give more clarity. We have to educate ourselves and our community about these things. We do not have the luxury of only being ethnocentric in our thinking any longer because we are in a global economy. Like Detroit Ford does not exist anymore. Like there is nothing happening in the United States that is starting, incepted, and built here and sold to Americans. Something is coming across these other countries, and people come with that, man. And so I am gonna own my own ignorance, and I'm gonna try to educate myself. I'm really sad to see this bloodshed that's happening. I know with every bomb, I know with everyone that goes off, you are creating more hate and more disdain, and you are egging this conflict on for another 50, 100, however many years. And it's sad, man, and it's truly sad. But you know, education can actually interrupt that, and we should take advantage of the privileges that we have here. In absence of Jubilee, that's David, that's Omar, I am Charles, and thank you all for joining the South Star Classroom. Class is out of session, but class starts next week, same bat time, same bat station. Don't be late, and if you do, bring a pass. Peace.